Escort is the most hated game mode in fighting. However, despite that, it's my favourite. I enjoy how much skill you need to actually put into the game mode for it to be enjoyable and for you to make a difference. However, despite this, I can still acknowledge that the game mode is easily the worst out of the three. However, when it comes to suggestions to make, when it comes to making Escort a better game mode, it's typically just remove Escort, or change Escort into a new game mode, because apparently it doesn't work in the game. And I disagree. The game mode has been left to rot for so long, and I want to make a video talking about the things I think Escort could get changed to make it into a more enjoyable and just funner experience for everyone. There's a lot of things to talk about when it comes to this. However, there's one thing which I want to start off by saying is that even if the game mode was changed into being the best game mode, arguably, would it even be a popular or loved game mode? Would people like it? And I would probably bet to say that no, for a few reasons. One reason being, well, the history behind it. Look at a character like Sombra in Overwatch. She used to be awful, right, as a character, just a pain. However, now, she's nowhere near as bad. In fact, she's really weak. A vast majority of people agree with, right? However, despite this, she's still one of the most banned heroes, and is still going on to her next rework. Which leads on to the question of, even if Escort would be changed, would it even be liked? Probably not. Probably not. Another important thing to mention is that the game mode in general takes a lot more skill than a game mode like Conquer or Annihilate, simply because of the fact that there's so many more things you have to personally think about. For example, are you going to take an off angle, and where should you be positioned? In general, positioning isn't the most important. There's definitely places and situations where your positioning really matters. In fact, all the time your positioning really matters. However, on a game mode like Escort, your positioning matters even more than a game mode like Conquer. Which then goes to say that the game is very casual centered, and having a game mode which is super in on stuff which would be more competitive, is that really something what most people would want to engage with? A great way to make Escort generally a better game mode is to look at how other hero shooter games with similar pacing to Phighting create their game modes, right? And now, I can't necessarily think of an actual game which has similar pacing to Phighting, because Phighting's pacing is so much faster than normal. All except Overwatch Stadium. Now, I'm not saying go ahead and straight up copy Overwatch Stadium's version of Push, as the two games are so completely different, with completely different things and characters especially surrounding them. However, there are takeaways you can take away from Overwatch Stadium's Push and translate them into Phighting's Escort. When you compare the two, you'll see that a big difference is where the spawns actually are. And because the spawns on Phighting's Escort maps are so incredibly close to the track and not even at the end of the track, it causes people to get to the point way faster than they ever should. In return, making overtime feel like it takes forever to end. Mixed with the fact that respawns are generally a lot shorter, faster, people end up getting to the point way too fast, causing that overtime to take forever to end. Something I would like to mention is that the UI is kind of just not very good at like telling you what on earth the game mode is like, right? Because the UI is basically every other UI. However, the game mode's so different in terms of it, because at the end of the day, it's not really about points, it's more about how far you've been. And having that distance as points, there's better ways to display it, right? Literally just add a line with the Escort in the middle telling you how far each side has gone. That would make more sense. However, in general, it's not a complaint in terms of how the game mode feels. It's more of a complaint about new players playing the game mode and probably getting confused. Or maybe I'm just downplaying it. Not downplaying it. Maybe people don't get confused. Maybe it's kind of simple. So, what other changes, other than the map, could you change to Escort in order to make it just a generally better game mode? The first one is, I don't know if this is necessarily in the game. It might be. I haven't really been able to tell. The Escort is kind of a funky thing. When you have like equal amounts of each team on the point near the Escort completely stops. Again, maybe it does do that. Maybe it doesn't though. I have no idea, truthfully, as I can't really tell. I also feel like in correlation to this, it would be really useful in order to have the point be just generally bigger, right? Because you need to be really, really close to the point for it to actually move, and that can often just be really annoying to deal with and can be a bit of a pain. Oh well. What do I mean by this? Well, when you've got one of your team, one of the enemy team, two blah 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 blah, the point does not move at all. That it's a pretty simple concept. They do it in Overwatch Stadium as well and Overwatch in general. However, there's some characters who then, in turn, become kind of issues with this. For example, Skate and kind of Shuriken. Shuriken isn't as much of an issue because of the fact that you can actually detect him. However, I still would argue is a bit of an issue when it comes to this. How would you fix that? Well, first off, just make it so when Skate is skating and when Shuriken is in his invis mode, they aren't able to contribute to the Escort at all. Would it be annoying? I guess. However, I feel like in general, especially with Skate, it just generally could make him a really strong character. And kind of just stole the point way, 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 way too much. And because he's not really vulnerable on his skateboard. He is, because there's a lot of characters who can deboard him. However, he's not that vulnerable to it on his skateboard. And because of that, he can just stay on his skateboard and would be able to constantly stall the point without really getting any damage done. Which is why I think that having it so that he is out of his skateboard being the only time when he can actually move the point, he's just more vulnerable there, and he's actually like, people can actually kill him. Same with Shuriken. Another thing which I'm not entirely sure if the point already does, but it's this. So when you are getting points, both sides, the point moves slower. However, when you're traversing between the two furthest points each side has done, it's at the regular speed it is now. I haven't really been able to tell if it does that already. I think it maybe does. However, I do think it should be a little bit harsher when it comes to being slower when it comes to moving forward. However, I feel like the main issue when it comes to Escort is that people tend to get to the point way, way, way too fast. And that's kind of because the game is typically faster paced. However, it's not only that. Again, it's because of the fact that the spawns are so close to the main road. However, it's also because of the fact that, well, respawns are really fast compared to other games. In addition to this, the team who's losing also respawns faster, so because an Escort game is typically a sweep, that then means that the enemy team who's losing, is going to constantly go to the point and Escort, so overtime is constantly triggered and will not end. And with that, that's not... What the fuck? Is the video even good? Did I even explain everything well? I don't know if I did. I don't know if I even talked about everything I wanted to talk about. I don't know. Well, I made this video last night and I feel like I could add more, but like I don't know what to add more because it's all gone out my brain now. I hope it was informative. I hope we liked it. I don't know. Is it even a good video? I mean, maybe it's not. Maybe everyone hates me now.